So we've got both an in-person and a Zoom attendees going on right now. My name is Nick Vale. Myself and Elizabeth Park are going to be presenting today about 2050 MTP and fiscal year 23 to 26 TIP development for projects, as well as the 2022 MPO dedicated calls for projects, and the 2022 Cmec, KYTC Cmec application cycle. We've got a number of folks in the room. I think in the interest of time, I'll just kind of highlight the folks that I know, and then the folks that we don't know, if you could just tell us who you are. Got myself, Nick Vale, Greg Burris, Alex Pazorski, Elizabeth Fark, Joseph Garcia, Zach Herzog, Andy Rush, Director of KIPTA. All those are all KIPTA folks. We've got John Carter and Herb, what was your last name? Schulmaker from City of Prospect. Matt Mounier from Jeffersontown. Brian Dixon from Clark County. Amanda Deathridge from Louisville Metro. Sir?
Greg and Beth Yellowstone Prospect.
Oh, Greg. Yeah, I've talked to you a million times. Right on. Glad to have you, Greg. And then, Greg, if you don't mind, who do we have out attendee-wise?
Miguel Zamora's in there, Keith Griffey's here, as well as Jeff O'Brien, Spencer Williams from KIPTA's here, and A. Binfield,
Michael Maternus from the University of Louisville,
Jessica Campbell, Randall Emery with KIPTA, Brian Eaton, Jared Jefferson,
Nick Creevy with Floyd County, and Justin Campbell is with New Albany. So we got a healthy number of folks here. Again, for those who don't know, we did the same presentation and workshop last Monday, so it will be essentially a repeat of information. So if you already heard this and you're on Zoom, feel free to not sit through the same thing. We are recording this meeting as we did with the prior meeting. All of our guidance documents and the recording of this meeting will be posted on our transportation planning portal, where all of our resources, applications, and whatnot can be found. I think probably a good time just to hop right into it.
Yeah.
Without further ado, Elizabeth Fark is going to talk about project development for the new MTP and TIP.
Okay. On the screen, I just have a little bit of the agenda that we're going to talk about, like what is project development, the process, timeline, all the major important details. Background, project development is the process of getting that slate of investments for the long-range plan. What are we going to do over the next 20 years that's going to help fix or improve all those roadway issues, biped needs that we see in the region that we're identifying as part of the plan as well. So this is the slate of projects. We have to do this as part of the federal regs and the component of the MTP. We also have to do this every 4 years because we are not a team in area. You may remember back in 2018, we were doing this same process, just slightly tweaked with terms and kind of nuances of how you deliver information to us. So this MTP has that 20-year horizon going out to 2050. We did the socioeconomic data, the travel model data that feed into those strategies. Those who don't know, we have to do air quality conformity on all these projects to ensure that our air quality isn't going to worsen. All these projects help improve air quality in the region.
Group of projects, right? Not as individually, but collective nature.
And in the TIP is our short-range federal funding document. So that contains all the projects that are actually being funded. They're federally funded, and then it also contains those regional state-funded projects from both Kentucky and New York. But really, those are for the states that are not LP. So what should be submitted? We have those existing projects in the current MTP. Okay, so that's going to be anything that's federally funded, and the regionally significant projects, anything that you all have put in there for CK 2040. We have all those, and we'll be asking you to update that information. But what else should you submit that might be new? If anything has federal funding that has been newly identified, including with our upcoming call for projects that Nick will talk about at the end of this presentation, with project development funding, anything that's come out of short range or long range plans, any corridor studies, and prospect, take a look at that, what's been done. I know the pandemic has happened, and that has put a lot of things on hold, but I know that there has still been work that has been done. Finally, if there's any projects that you all are anticipating for grants for, the bill has many discretionary grants that keep on coming out. So if you have a RAISE grant or a
Bridge investment project.
Bridge, connecting communities, those are just some of the ones you might want to take a look at. Go ahead and put them into the MTP at this time, because the feds do want to see that there is that planning action. You have that out there. It's something and it didn't just ahead to the side. So take a look at that too. What do we need detail-wise about a project? We're going to need name, description. What are you doing? Are you adding travel lanes? Are you building bike and pedestrian facilities? Adding turn lanes, or is it a maintenance project? Are you maintenance project? We also need a cost in year of expenditure dollars. We need that you anticipate traffic to be traveling on this road. And these will all be outlined in the form, so don't be scared to have to write all this down. But we do need the description and the cost, enough detail to be able to model those air quality conformities. So please keep that in mind. In your description, be accurate. And we will have to come back and forth with you sometimes to just iron out those details. You don't understand what so to save everybody time, it helps to have that really brief. We will also use the answers that you provide to evaluate the project. If you were at the last TPC meeting, the project evaluation was approved. And this helps us rank projects, potentially for funding consideration down the road against other projects. So use the answers for that. And then finally, you will want to give us that KIP funding information only if funding has been identified. We do ask for that information. Questions so far? Project evaluation criteria, a little bit more about it because it is new. We had an evaluation last time, but this is much more streamlined, tied to the new performance measures, goals, objectives that were also approved by TP. And this evaluation, again, allows us to systematically rank the project by that data-driven evaluation. We tie this to a lot of data. And just a little bit about the summary of it. There's 200 points possible. And we're looking at modal criteria. If it's a roadway project, are you improving congestion? If it's a bikehead project, are you connecting it to shopping areas or major employment areas? So we look at those criteria differently. We're also going to look at safety. Are you helping improve high crash locations? Are you being sustainable in the way you're thinking about green infrastructure or resilient? That's in there as well. timeline. So, the project application, which is the form that we use to collect all information for new projects, is going to open on August 8th. That's on Monday. We're going to give you until October 31st to submit all project details to us. After that point, staff will review and evaluate the project, and we will also identify the impacts and analyze them for the MTP document, so that by late January, we have that slate of projects that we're conducting the conformity analysis on. We're about ready to go out to public outreach. At that point in time, the public is able to see that slate of investments that we anticipate being done in the next 20 years. They provide their feedback and comments on it, and then all is good to go. We're aiming for that April TPC and TPC recommendation and approval, so that we have final federal review, which is final seal of approval on the MTP, and then just in time for the new fiscal year. So the process is going to look a little bit different for existing projects and new projects. Existing projects, because we recognize that a few sponsors have well over 100 projects to go through. We've decided to collect all those projects into a Excel spreadsheet, and I'll show you in just a second, and Alex can explain it. But we're going to ask you to review those projects. Hey, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those projects, that way you can just run down the list. So look at what needs to be updated.
Yeah, should be able to.
But we'll have the columns marked and go ahead and update everything that we need you to update. For those, if it's a significant change for a project, we are going to ask that you utilize the form that I'll talk about in just a minute, instead, to give us all the update information, particularly if the scope is.
And it will be helpful, I think, to give context to this, to also look at the form, which will go into more detail in a bit. It'll make a little more sense when you see all the questions that are being asked in there. The spreadsheet for, like say Louisville Metro, who have a lot of projects, is our effort to try and make it a little bit easier, so you don't have to go with existing projects and enter them all into the form. But at the same point, we want to make sure we gather the information so the project can be evaluated right. So for things like MTO dedicated funding and other things, we're able to give each project its due. So everybody will get a spreadsheet for their jurisdiction. We're looking at Clarksville now, not to specifically pick on Clarksville, but they have a nice short amount of projects that are still detailed enough that it's a good example, just to give everybody. And what you will find is the list of all your projects from 2040. And highlighted in yellow are the areas you actually need to potentially think about changing.
Can you zoom in a little bit on the Excel?
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So everything is going to be highlighted in yellow that you actually need to worry about, and I'll just quickly go through that here. So column B is just going to be, should the project be removed? And you'll note that you'll just have a yes or no there, already automatically pre-populated.
On that point, you only need to remove a project if it's not going to be done, if it's no longer going to be considered a project. If you completed a project, there's another section that Alex is going to get to, so just to be clear on what a removal of project means.
A updating, total project costs, will be an important one, especially with inflation is, and a lot of these projects, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, often there's gonna be an updated project cost. If you need to update the open to the public date, or if the project is actually already open to the public, you can make a note of those columns. The end ones, get a little bit more complicated, but like I said, looking through the actual online form, some of this will make a lot more sense, because again, it's trying to take just some of the various things you would have to answer for a new project. But over here from column X to AC, that's just updating for, I believe, programs would be in the Cmec.
That's right.
Any updates to year for phases, and funding for phases and total cost for those phases.
And that's only if you have secured funding. So you can see that top project, there is no TIP funding listed in there. And that means it's a MTP only project. It's not in the TIP at this point because there is no secured funding.
If they did have secured funding, they could go ahead and enter it the yellow. We'll accept it that way.
If we have secured funding, but we want to change the year that it's in, is this the place to accept that? Okay.
Yep.
When it comes to
Or the amount that we're, you know, how do we formally request?
if we're talking about MPO dedicated projects, then we still need to follow the process of requesting the funds first, going through the process of getting them awarded before we make those changes. So if you've had approval from TPC for a cost increase or phase shift, yes, enter that.
So we want to do a cost increase or phase shift, not yet submitted it, don't put it in, follow the normal process.
I would say in your case, but I know you're probably speaking to a lot of phase shifts that are about to happen. If you're a sponsor with MPO dedicated funds and you're planning to go ahead and moving out phases, then just give me a heads up, and maybe start submitting those phase shift requests, or maybe just send me an email. For those who have current existing MPO dedicated projects and you're trying to make changes to fiscal years and costs, give me a heads up before so we can just talk about what you're planning to do. That's probably easier for the other folks in the room. Yep.
The other items on here you'll see after the potential for phase shift are all various questions that again are coming from the form or coming from the overall project evaluation, and it's just the ones that we won't be able to get, basically with the location and some of the other pieces that we already have on there, some automatic ones. So those are one project that has 3 phases, you have separate road for each phase.
That's correct.
Correct.
And if you need to add a row, delete a row, feel free.
So the evaluation pieces that you'll have to look at for updating existing projects are divided into a couple of roadway specific pieces and a couple of bike ped specific pieces. A roadway project, you can ignore the bike ped, correct? So with the roadway, one thing we're evaluating on is if projects are using FHWA proven safety countermeasures. And what you'll basically want to do if you are, and we're happy to go over in more detail what those are, if anybody needs more of a primer on that. You can see all of the various treatments are going to be preset in each of these squares. So say we're going to add street lighting and rumble strips. So you would be able to
it only lets you multi-select if you're in the desktop version of Excel.
It's a good moment, thank you, Spencer. You're going to have to not open this in the browser, open it on the desktop for Excel, or you're not going to be able to use the cool functions that we put in with the macro, which I just realized right now. However, when you open it on the desktop, not in your browser, you'll be able to select multiple options here, should they be relevant to the particular project. So it's proven safety countermeasures, both if it's roadway or if it's a bike ped. We have an evaluation item on innovative projects, automated vehicle technology, ITS elements, alternative fuels. A question on the specific infrastructure type for bike ped projects. We have an item on resiliency, around green infrastructure. And then finally, an evaluation item, giving more points if something is in a planning study completed in the last 10 years. So we ask, simply yes or no on that, and then, the name of the planning study in the year that it is. We will have a one-pager that gives you everything I just said, sort of a how-to on how to fill this out. Staff is also very happy to answer any questions once you sit down on this, if you want to get in contact, with us. But again, the intent here is to sort of make this on both y'all's end and our end as easy as possible and as streamlined as possible. So we're spending less time all collectively filling out forms, more time getting projects, through.
If it is not easier for you, you're more than welcome to go ahead and fill out the form. I'll show you in just a second. But this way, we thought it would be easier for most sponsors just to run down their short list of projects, and we will enter all this information in. That way we have all the data on our end in one database. I did also want to note, on the cost and open to public, keep in mind, if you have a project with an open to public, so like, let's take this 2025, but there's no identified TIP funding, how likely is that project to really be completed at this point, that soon, without funding identified? So kind of think about those things. I know the open to public is a best guess estimate, but it helps us identify which air quality scenario that project should be modeled in. Added travel lanes or center turn lanes. If we are more than happy to walk you through that if you're having trouble figuring out what that date should be. And then also the cost. We are seeing double.
Yeah, there's been 40 to 50%, I mean, at minimum increases for like cost, if not a couple, I think 200%. So.
Yeah, so talk to your engineers and also help work through, considerations, but I anticipate almost every project cost needs to be looked at, unless it's being imminently constructed and that's an accurate cost, because it's, when is it going to be done, how much is it going to cost in the future, given what we know right now. So there are main things that we need to know for existing projects.
What doesn't it, at least in theory, need to be updated for year of expenditure costs? If you change your year and you don't believe inflation's hitting you, you gotta account for inflation that way, right? Say, hey, we're moving it out 10 years, it's just gonna cost more for that reason, let alone, the current inflation, right?
So, many of the projects that we have listed as 2035, 2040 right now are those that are just really far out on the horizon. I anticipate most of those will be 2050 and 2045, so that needs to be 10 more years added to the. Okay, let's go on this spreadsheet. Okay, this will also go out August 8th to you all, still due by Halloween.
And this is only for, sponsors with existing projects in the MTP. We're looking to submit new projects. We're gonna talk about that next.
We have a form that's hopefully more streamlined than the previous form, the form that you all have been using right now. This is still called the project application. See if I this is built, much information for some. This is built with our GIS Survey 123. It allows us to better collect project location in the GIS format that we are able to continually tie that downstream to all of our interactive maps and analysis. So that's why we switched to this software platform. again, the questions are gonna look a little bit different. There are fewer questions, and they are what Alex showed you in the. I'll go through this really quick. The first page is going to be that basic project information, the name, the project improvement type, any options. Have trouble deciding, we have a guide with examples of what project it might look like. It might be if you have a certain type, that will be linked in the instructions. So for this, we'll say it's we're adding travel lanes to the roadway. We're going to ask for the project description, again, in enough detail to model for air quality. Justification, why this project's being done. There's a lot of crashes, there's a lot of congestion, head facilities needed.
Those cases where if we did an access manager plan or as part of the
Yes.
justification,
Yeah.
that might be communication, so here's the.
Yep. It's that purpose and need. This justification is shown to the public. I mean, it's in all of our public-facing documents, and it's used by the working group when they're deciding. We're going to ask what county it's in, cost, open to public, and then if there's an existing Kentucky CID number or Indiana DES number. We're going to ask some contact information, sponsor agency, name of the person that we should contact. You know, if you're a junior planner filling this out, maybe you're going to put Amanda's name. Person that we should always be in contact with, not necessarily a person filling out. Phone and email. We're going to ask about that location, several options, depending on what best fits for the project. The best way to give us some information is to draw it. So you're going to click on this line icon up here. And project on. Okay. Drag and drop, double click to finish it. As close to the road line as possible. We are only allowed to draw lines in here. You can type the best you can, and we can always edit it later, but this gives us the best way to figure out where the location is.
Good description, by the way, should make it easy for us to figure it out downstream from this too, so.
It should.
Be careful about your descriptions, or
I will
please give the details in the description as best you can.
As far as the evaluation goes afterwards, a lot of what the evaluation is what it's gonna target is that location of that line you draw. So do be specific and put as many of those nodes, those little, every time you put a little dot that the line connected to, it's called node. You just want it to be accurate because it's gonna, what we're basically gonna do is compare it to a bunch of different data layers, and however they interact with those data layers is how your points will be evaluation. So, about
What if it's just like an intersection, a line there, I can type the
the short line.
just a
Short line
through
in
the-
back in his GIS department might,
Yeah.
down the road, but at least I can.
Just capture the additional images.
Right.
Statistics, and I
Yeah.
may have 50 feet on each side of. What projects with multiple locations?
Question. You have projects with multiple locations, or you have a shapefile in existence at your agency and you want to share that instead of drawing a line, you're able to upload a zip file of that shapefile. Or if you don't have a shapefile and you have a map, maybe, or something showing those multiple locations, you're able to upload a PDF or like a Word doc, showing those locations. And our GIS department will map because you're not able to put in. That's really applicable to many signalized intersections. In one project, maybe, transit bus stops in multiple locations,
I have a street case project that's here and then here.
that's
Two segments that make up the
So I would go ahead and upload a
whole map.
picture map if you don't have a shape file, yeah. If you have projects that don't have a location, programs, TARC, buying a bus,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are gonna be TARC-based, things that are located in and around, buses,
rare.
equipment, random equipment and stuff like that. Programs like, APCD has the, Kentucky and Air Education Program. Here at KIPTA, we have the Every Commute Counts program, the van pool program. There's no specific location.
So if you need it, that option is there. And you'll get into the modal specific questions based on the project improvement type that you selected. So in this case, we selected a roadway major widening. So we're gonna be asked questions about existing travel lanes and proposed travel lanes. If you're gonna be putting in a center turn lane or a left turn bay or right turn bay. And these help us with the air quality modeling. That information is important. We're also going to ask if you're putting in multimodal facilities for bicycle and pedestrians. Select multiple. And if you'll remember what we had in the spreadsheet, these are the questions that are in the form. So all the proven safety countermeasures. If the project is innovative with AV technology or ITS elements, or and then many different questions directly relate back to that project evaluation. We'll receive points based on the scoring system for that criteria. Again, those look different for every mode, a little different for every. Then we'll ask about other impacts, the planning study. If a planning study has been done, this can be a corridor study, thoroughfare plan, county-wide, movable transportation, economic development plan. Anything that's publicly vetted, that you all have ranked this project and said it's important. We're also going to ask for that name and the. We also have impact on equity. How is this project promoting equity in the system, or are you doing something specific with outreach that's promoting equitable transportation? We have complete streets elements in this project. That's more than bicycle and pedestrian and tree. Although those are often the main focus, but it's also side management, or something to help freight vehicles move better, emergency vehicles move in rural areas. But there's many things based on the context that you. We also have the ITS components, if you can just pound on those, and any freight mobility components. And then we have the funding section. So again, if you have secured funding for this new project, the TIP funding at this time. You'll note, as it says on the form, this is not the application for MPO dedicated funding. We're hoping to secure some of those STB funds, TA funds that Nick's going to talk about in a minute. Hold up on entering funding information. We'll take care of that down the road once the project is awarded. But if you do have secured funding, please click yes and fill out these details by phase. All the phases are listed in here. Design, right-of-way construction, what you normally see at fiscal year, the phase, source, and then the actual funding dollars, that phase. dollars will add up automatically. There are 6 available pages to enter information. If you don't need to enter that many, just one page, just click through the rest. But once you get out to that 6th page, there's a submit button. Done. That's the form, nutshell. There will be instructions, a screenshot, and staff is always available to help walk you through the form. Back to
Yeah. Oh.
Well, I have on the form. Don't have any questions for existing new projects at this time. Questions online?
One question, is this going to be the form going forward, after the new MTP is developed, if we were to make?
Yes. We're gonna have, like what we have now, a very simplified version asking for just what modifications you're making. Often, just minor changes, tip funding or OTP. Yes, there will be that going forward. We just don't need it for this round because of that spreadsheet.
Yeah, we are hoping that this will be our form for a long time, and not change again.
I will let Nick take it away with the more interesting part, the funding.
The funding piece. So, yeah, the MPO dedicated funding call for projects is something we're kicking off in conjunction with project development for the new MTP and TIP. We haven't had a call in a couple years in Kentucky, and almost at least 4 years it's been since we've had a call for projects in for our Indiana sponsors. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the kind of we'll talk a little bit about the process, timeline. We'll go into the application itself, the MPO dedicated application. It's like 6 questions at most, maybe. But we'll kind of get into details and also how much funding is available, which is always important. So, kind of a quick overview. In our region, obviously the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, that document is considered our programming document, meaning any federal funds that have been awarded or secured for a surface transportation project must be in the TIP. KYTC has their buckets of funding at the state level that they can determine, and legislatures can determine how those funds are awarded. NDOT has the same thing going on. It's just a different process in Indianapolis. TARC has their own buckets of funding that they get from Federal Transit Administration. And then there are small pots of funding that come directly to the MPO and are, we call MPO dedicated funds. And these are managed and awarded by the Transportation Policy Committee, which is our decision-making body. We will have an official guidance document that will be sent out on Monday. There will be an email that Elizabeth is crafting. We're all kind of playing a role in that, but there will be, again, instructions on the project application form, but also guidance all about the call for projects. This workshop will be recorded, so we'll have that for future use. As she mentioned, will be available for any one-on-one help that may be needed. And all of this information will be located out on our transportation planning portal. How much funding is available? We are looking at approximately a little over $80 million total. So in Indiana, NDOT sub-allocates, meaning they receive funds from Federal Highway and then send them down to us. they give us funding for 5 programs. The carbon reduction program, it's a brand new program. We'll get into the details of some of these in a minute. The Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program is all about improving the air quality. We estimate that there'll be about $6 million, and these are all pretty conservative estimates. We don't want to, there may be more than this, but from what we know right now, this is a good conservative estimate. There'll be about $3 million for highway safety improvements, $9 million for surface transportation block grant projects, and $2 million for transportation alternatives, for roughly $20 million. And again, in Indiana, we're going to continue doing these every 4 years because we just don't receive that much funding, and it's normally not worth the sponsor's time or all of our collective time to do a 2-year call for projects. In Kentucky, we do receive a lot more funding, and there's also some flexibility in how we're able to carry over funds. So we are just making 2 years worth of funding available. In the surface transportation block grant program, there's $39 million, and then $9 million for transportation alternatives. The carbon reduction program is much higher than it normally would be, but this is a new program, and we have technically been receiving funds since fiscal year 2022. So we're going to lump all these funds out through from fiscal year 22 to 2027, which will catch us up with where we are with STBG and TA program. So $16 million is what we have available, but we only get about $2.5 million per year. So that's a little inflated for this first time call for projects. Down the road, when we do another call for projects for that program, it will be closer to like $5 million over 2 years. So about $80 million total, $20 million in Indiana and $64 million in Kentucky. Project eligibility. So I lumped these 3 programs together, the carbon reduction program, CRP, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, Cmec, and the Transportation Alternatives Program, TA, together on this slide because there's a lot of commonalities between them. Maybe we'll start at the bottom. The Transportation Alternatives Program is all about, obviously, bike and pedestrian-focused improvements. There are some transit improvements that are allowed if it's in and around a bus stop or something like that where pedestrians would be. Any project that's eligible under the TA program is also eligible under the CRP program. Likewise, the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, it's all about reducing single occupancy vehicle use, improving our air quality, all sorts of different other eligibilities listed there. But anything that is Cmec eligible is also eligible for CRP funds. So when you're filling out your application and say you're doing a bicycle improvement, you can select all 3 of them. You can select to apply for all 3 of those programs. Obviously, there's a little differentiation between Cmec and TA projects, but a lot of them are one and the same. So just keep that in mind when applying. The HSIP program, this is the only one that's funded at a 90-10 funding split. So for most programs, for most grants from Federal Highways and USDOT, the government will provide 80% of the cost, and you have to provide 20% of the cost. This is the only one where that percentage drops down to 10 for the local cost. Again, this is only eligible in, we only have funds for this program from NDOT. KYTC manages the program on their own end, so if you'd like to seek funding from them, you need to work with Mike Kwan at KYTC. HSIP projects are all about improving safety. So that list of proven safety countermeasures that we've been alluding to, if you're doing one of those types of projects, you're automatically eligible. NDOT also has another list of kind of their systemic improvements, a lot of which overlap with those FHWA countermeasures. But if you're doing one of those 2 types of projects, and we'll have links to those documents and what those look like, you're automatically eligible. And so we definitely recommend folks really try to steer towards those proven safety countermeasures. There are other projects that can be considered eligible for HSIP funds, but we have to do a cost-benefit analysis. So if you are applying and you aren't doing a proven safety countermeasure, we will have to work with you after your applications are submitted to fill out that cost-benefit calculation. Likewise on Cmec, I didn't mention this, but on Cmec, there is also a Cmec emissions calculator. that we will have to, run your project through in order to, ensure that it is eligible.
On the HSIP one, that, you may have said this, but it's in Indiana only on that, with the cost. Which, by the way, you know, Nick definitely said that, that's the only one that Skip the TPC has control of. We don't have control of it, the sellers in Kentucky.
And we don't have the control of the dollars in Cmec in Kentucky either, but I'm gonna talk about the fact that they're doing their own call for projects almost simultaneously as ours. Finally, FTBG program. This program, pretty much can fund any bridge or tunnel projects, any bike or pedestrian projects, and any roadway projects if they're located on a road that's classified, as something other than a local road or a rural minor collector. And then there's some grandfather language there at the end about really old roads that may have been classified prior to, 1991. Yes.
Hey, I'm sorry, could you go back to HSIP? Is that, did I hear Indiana only on that?
That is Indiana only. NDOT sub-allocates those to the TPC. KYTC, has those with statewide control. Mike Vaughn manages the HSIP program at KYTC, and he would be the one to follow up with. I know Metro and some others have had some success getting funds through that program.
Nick, I'm not familiar with the federal aid highway. Would US 42 be not listed under that?
That is definitely, what is that, arterial?
On the last one? Yeah, so there's, so what is eligible, said another way, would be what are known as collector roadways at the bottom. That's probably the Bluegrass Parkway out here, you want to get down here. Then arterials, which would be like your Hirschhorn, your US 42, your Blankenbaker even, and then the freeways, which are freeways and expressways.
And we have an online resource center mapping tool that, classifies all roadways, on their federal functional class. And so that information is out there as well.
So in the prospect area, US 42, River Road, Shirley, state highways that are coming in from Oldham County. Might be about it. None of the neighborhood roads, for example.
Yeah, that kind of sums up project eligibility. This is a high-level summary. In the guidance document, there are links to all of the federal guidance documents because some of these lists of eligible projects can be 2 and 3 and 4 pages long. So there's a lot more eligibility with specific projects that I listed. I kind of just did a general summary of those. USDOT priorities. The Biden administration has been kind of focusing on these nine things right here in terms of priorities for funding from their perspective. So they're just considerations for us all to think about while we're putting together projects. ADA is always an important thing, people with disabilities, ensuring they can utilize the roadways, the sidewalks that are built. Complete streets is a huge thing that's being pushed at the federal level. We are working on a policy for complete streets, planning to take that to committees this month. And that's gonna have a big impact on this. We're hoping we'll have a big impact on this call for projects. Safety, you can see up there, and truck parking are 2 other big topics that are going on right now. Talked about. Complete streets policy. So we have been working on a policy since 2019. Complete streets is all about considering all modes of transportation and not just focusing on single occupancy vehicles or freight or something else. It's making sure that at the planning design level, you're attempting to accommodate all modes. There may be reasons why you can't, and we understand that. TTCC working group received a final draft, and we have a quick call tomorrow morning with all of the working group members to talk about any final questions or issues. And we're planning to present that to our committees in August for approval, and that would apply to this MPO dedicated call for projects. To be honest, it's been a long haul to get this done, so we're trying to obviously get this in before we do the call for projects. So understand that the way the documents are set up now, there is an assumption that the policy will be passed. But if something turns out to be not the case, we will adjust. But we are, fingers crossed, hoping to have that in place. And so what that means is you need to accommodate in your project at least one of the 3 modes you see listed up there: bike, pedestrian, and or transit. We're not asking you to accommodate all 3. And then separately, if it's all about context sensitive design. So there's places out in the, more rural areas of our region, where a bike lane may not make sense. A lot of times the bikers just want to have a large, wide, paved shoulder. So being sensitive to the context of the roadway and the neighborhoods is always important. But we want you to try to accommodate one of those three modes, and if you can't, there are 7 exemptions that are outlined that would kind of get you still be falling in with the policy because there's a reason and an exemption reason why you can't accommodate a certain one of these three modes. Some of them are prohibition by law, right? If the law says you can't do it, we obviously are not going to force you to. Maintenance projects. If you're doing a maintenance project, we're not asking, we understand the intent there. Guardrail, installation of traffic control devices for the most part. We're not asking you to add a bike lane when you add a new traffic signal necessarily. Where an existing facility already accommodates another mode, there may be a disproportionate cost. So there's a number of factors and reasons why you may feel you cannot accommodate one of those three modes, and if that's the case, in the application, you'll just need to click one or as many as you think apply, and then provide a justification. That justification will then be provided to the TTCC working group, who is always in charge of kind of evaluating these projects on a detailed level, and then making a funding recommendation to our committees. And so they will kind of initially deem whether an exemption is justified or not, and then ultimately TPC will have to approve those exemptions. So process and schedule. So if you're applying for MPO dedicated funds, first thing we want to talk about is the project application that Elizabeth just went over. That's the key for us to collect all that important data that we use to evaluate projects. So new projects, submit that new project application. Existing projects, work through the form that Alex showed you to update any of those project details. And if you're changing the scope, the termini of an existing project, we will need you to go back through the new form and submit that, because the information we have on that project right now would not be accurate, and we would not be able to map that on your behalf. So if you're changing something, if your termini extends 2 more miles now, you're going to have to resubmit that, because we can't go through and evaluate that ourselves. So step 1, either submit changes through the Excel form or submit a new project application. Step 2, submit the MPO dedicated funding application. The timeline for that is the same, so we want everything wrapped up by the end of October. Staff will review the applications through December. We'll convene a working group meeting. There may be maybe up to 2 meetings, depending on how much competition there is for these funds. And then we will go to our committees for a recommendation and action in February of 2023, and then issue those funding award letters the following month. So this is just kind of a flow chart that kind of details what I just talked about here. So there's 2 things. If you look on the side there, we're talking about MTP development, MTP and TIP project development, and then the MPO dedicated funding call for projects. If you're an existing project and you're only changing basic details like the open to public data and project cost, among others, then you can just return that Excel file. If you're making changes to the scope, termini, you need to submit that project application. New projects must submit the project application, and then all projects must submit the MPO dedicated funding application. That application probably 10 times. I apologize, but that kind of is what it is. These are applications. Is anyone confused about the process that we just outlined?
Yeah, keep in mind, when we say new projects in this regard, it's new projects for the dedicated funding stream, right?
No.
If it's a brand new project, long-range project, they don't need to do an MPO dedicated funding application.
If they want MPO dedicated funding,
If they just want to put it out there for 2050,
that we talked about, that was the project development. This,
If
Right.
you're not taking funding from us, you don't need to fill out that last
that's what I mean,
unit.
that's what I mean.
yeah. So all we're talking about here is the call for projects, at the end of the day. So, we'll need to submit either the Excel form or a new project application and the MPO dedicated application. Okay, let me take a stop there. That's all I have on KIPTA's MPO dedicated call for projects. I got a couple slides about KYTC's Cmec application cycle. Before we go there, I want to hold for any comments or questions. Anybody on Zoom, feel free to chime in or type into the chat as well. Okay, so that wraps up the MPO dedicated call for projects. We do have an opportunity for folks in Kentucky. Sponsors in Kentucky can submit and apply for Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program funds from KYTC's Office of Local Programs. Jackie Jones is kind of runs this this program, and she alerted all the MPOs about the upcoming call a couple weeks ago. They don't have any estimate on exactly how much funding they're planning to award. But what we can say is they generally receive about $14 million a year through this program. So we think that's probably a good minimum. But they have flexibility and an authority to be creative with those funds. So we don't know exactly how much, but this region, more than probably any region in the state, definitely needs to get our fair share. And so we are strongly encouraging every sponsor in the Kentucky side of the region to submit projects for KYTC Cmec call for projects.
These could come down the local roads, like sidewalks.
Yes. Yeah. And sidewalks and bikes are always eligible on any road, or under almost any program, I should say. The application window is pretty tight. It's coming up August 15th to September 30th. Don't know that I've seen, as of last week, their Cmec website was not updated with the new application information yet, so I assume Jackie's probably working on that as we speak, if it's not up already. I have not checked this week. But there will be more details about their call, their application cycle, as they call it, on their website. They do plan to have at least one virtual meeting, is my understanding. And consistent with kind of past precedent, they will be asking the MPOs to prioritize the list of Cmec applicants. So we get 5 applications, they're going to ask us, and specifically TPC, to rank those in order of priority. That doesn't mean that they will be funded in that order, but that they will take that into consideration.
Washington through this application process, right, to get to their
That's fine.
Cmec application. Whenever they get evaluated here, do they go through this new process for evaluation too?
Good point. Yes, that's exactly right. So what you guys need to do, sponsors need to do 3 things. 1, if you're planning to submit for the Kentucky Cmec call, submit that through the project application that Elizabeth showed us for new projects. If you have an existing project, it's probably rare that you would have an existing project for the Cmec call, but if you do, you can update those details via the Excel sheet. So you have to do one of those 2 things again: new project, submit the form; existing project, update the Excel file. Second, go to KYTC's website and submit the Cmec application to them by September 30th, and then reach out to us, letting us know that you've done those 2 things, and we will work with you on that Cmec emissions calculator that has to be performed. There's a calculation that must be done to make sure it's there's some determination that there's going to be a reduction in emissions. After you do those 3 things, staff will again review the applications and develop a recommended prioritization list. We will take those to our committees, and they'll be able to shift priorities however they see fit, and ultimately TPC approval will finalize what those priorities are, and then we will send that list to KYTC for their consideration. So that is the KYTC 2022 Cmec application cycle in a nutshell.
Are we gonna include this information when we're sending out on Monday?
Let's just include it in the email. I'll put a blurb in there. Hopefully the website's updated, on KYTC's website is updated by then, but yes, we will put kind of some brief guidance, just summarizing what we put here.
So Kentucky sponsors have the link to the website because it is KYTC system on ours, so we'll make sure that you.
All right, that is all we have. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the Cmec call in Kentucky? Okay, any last comments or questions about any of the 3 topics we presented on today? Okay. Appreciate everyone's time and attention. Again, we'll have an email on Monday out with all the details, links to all the documents, forms, applications, and whatnot. Thanks again. You guys have a good day.